welcome to the Drama Coach podcast. Today, I'm joined by Georgie Ross, Director of Teaching and Learning at the Oracy Group. We're talking about something that sits right at the heart of what good actors do: communication. Oracy has become a hot topic in education lately, and it's essential for both young performers and parents, because we're not just talking about acting. We're talking about how we help young people communicate, expressing themselves clearly, confidently, and with understanding. So without further ado, welcome, Georgie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
My gosh, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us about yourself and why Oracy is important to you.
So like you, I was a drama teacher for 25 years, both in the UK and overseas. And I think I just really, I got to see how life-changing it can be for young people if they're able to articulate their sort of personal branding in a meaningful way. And so in the last 5 years, I've been teaching Oracy in schools, kind of introducing Oracy programs for teachers to encourage that dialogic teaching, and also for young people globally with more of a focus on sort of the outcome in terms of the world of work and that kind of skill set and why it's important. So I really am very passionate about young people having these opportunities in drama for so many reasons. So it's brilliant to come and talk about this with you.
Good. So we share, like you said, the passion and the starting point of both being drama teachers. And we've kind of taken our separate paths more recently from that. So with my teacher hat on then, could you explain to our listeners, because many of them are young students themselves and a lot of them parents of young performers, what does Oracy mean? Because I know sometimes people can get mixed messages about what it actually is.
So really, to break it down in a very simple sentence, Oracy is the ability to express yourself confidently and clearly, and also to listen well. And I think sometimes we forget that second bit, so it's the ability to speak, but it's also the ability to listen well.
And what does that look like in schools and beyond? What if people are doing Oracy well, what does that look like? What does that sound like?
So to have a rich Oracy culture in a school, you really want lots of talk in classrooms, and you want that to be meaningful talk. So I've discussed this a lot on various podcasts about, sometimes we just assume that talk can happen. So we'll say to a group, oh, go and discuss this, but we don't actually give them any sort of guidelines or ground rules. So it's actually the art as well of teaching teachers and students how to have good conversations, which is brilliant for classroom settings in terms of being able to have meaningful discussions, but also it's kind of an essential life skill, as we know.
That was my next question about why does this matter beyond school and for adults as well. I've done some workshops for adults in public speaking, and I think there's a lot of crossover there. Why does this matter beyond school?
Well, we know now that the world of work is kind of screaming at education and schools and saying, look, we're getting these graduates, but communication skills are a real issue. And actually graduates themselves are also saying, look, we don't feel that we have had practice at these soft skills. So communication, leadership, conflict resolution, public speaking, all of these things are essential for whatever you do in life, actually. So lots of people think, oh, I'm not going to do drama because I don't want to be an actor. It's like, well, you might be an actor, but you might also do a myriad of other careers. Well, you will do. And really, these skills are essential for whatever you do in life.
I think there is acting in every element that you do. Whether that's standing up and giving a presentation, or I think we all do put on different masks for different situations, don't we? We're different with our family to our peers, or even different peers. And I think, like you said, people are going to have various different jobs that they do, and there is an element of bringing out, I want to say masking because that sounds negative, but bringing out different elements of yourself that I think drama and acting do allow you to do. I really like the point you made about not just, well, it is the listening, isn't it, and being able to respond appropriately. We think, oh, it's just chatting and just let the children chat, but moving that to a higher level, the conflict resolution. If someone had taught me how to resolve conflict verbally, I would. That's a huge skill that I probably still don't possess, to be honest. And when we're thinking about the listeners of this podcast, there is, so much rejection and difficulty. And if a relationship between a parent and an agent has that, I'm not saying they are having a conflict, but they're always trying to resolve the problem of not enough work or how the industry works. And I think if conflict resolution was learnt from an early age, I feel that could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and as well, resilience,
Yes.
and actually through good conversations, through debating, through listening to a different viewpoint to yours and still being able to feel confident in what you're saying. You need to practice those skills because, as you say, suddenly if you're entering any kind of, especially world of entertainment, those are things that you're going to face on a regular basis. But they are, of course, people are very sensitive around that, and you don't necessarily get the experience to develop those skills. But we can practice them in drama and in good oracy focused classrooms. And that again could be life changing, as you say. I know lots of adults that really have said, if I'd done this when I was like 10, I maybe wouldn't have had some of the challenges now. And again, I've mentioned before, but if you think about globally now, we're so globally connected and so competitive globally that actually we all need an edge. And if that can be, the ability to walk away from a situation, take the positives, keep the smile, and be able to process it, be your best personal advocate, that again, I think is really important.
How do you make sure, this is not a question we planned, but I feel this is along the same lines. I try not to lose my trail of thought here. When you're teaching people, like you say, debating and listening to someone else's opinion, I love listening to other people's opinions, but I've then been accused of, oh, you're such a teacher, you're sitting on the fence. I do love, and again, the storytelling. I love hearing both sides of the story. How do you teach that to students without them, or worse, their parents, thinking that you're making this wishy-washy person without their beliefs or their strengths? I hope that makes
I
sense
think,
as well.
you can debate well without being aggressive.
Mm,
You can, I've seen some fabulous debates really getting at the core of a subject, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're acting in a particularly volatile way. You can ask a question calmly. You can calmly pose an idea or a point of reference in a debate. And you think if we're practicing that in school, then what could happen in life, in governments, in the world, if we're all able to share sort of calm and focused discussions. So I think teaching that skill and also teaching that the listening skill so that before you respond to anything that you hear, that you have that pause and reflection time. And that's a really key skill in a classroom as well, isn't it? I think in terms of questioning is that we want an answer immediately, but actually we need to leave that space for young people to think. And as a parent as well, not automatically expecting that response.
I can definitely be guilty of that. Absolutely. How then, as a tip for parents of young performers, how can we remind ourselves to give? Is there a nice little trick that we can do to make sure we give them that breathing space, that thinking space?
I think it's really important to train yourself as well to be comfortable in silence. So, often we want, and especially around public speaking, if you think about fillers, it's because we always want to fill those gaps. But
Yes.
actually being comfortable in the silence, which we sometimes feel that means that there's not a meaningful interaction going on. So giving that space and time for conversations at home. I always say that round the dinner table is a great place to have those discussions. And sometimes I'll have little questions at my dinner table of, ideas. Yeah, this is only because I'm sort of teaching this, and I'm basically
Well, then I
using my
love
family
this.
I'm using my family as guinea pigs. Let's face it. So,
Oh, don't we all?
so a few questions that you could start, and it's been really interesting because things can get quite heated. And, I'm sort of like there saying, well, exactly what I've just said, that we don't necessarily, we can all have a different opinion, but we can all stay at the table. And when I think about drama teaching practice, often you've got groups that work together that are like, I don't want to work with this person, miss. And
Oh,
my
yes.
argument was always, listen, you're going to have to work with people that you don't necessarily see eye to eye with in life. This is great sort of practice for that. So, so little conversations, and also to make the most of car journeys, of walking. They're often the best places to get conversations going.
I like that. Less pressure as well, I think, when you're
Yeah.
looking forwards rather than opposite each other.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think, I've lost my train of thought slightly, but for actors, I was just thinking about what you were saying about other opinions. We need to, as young performers, adopt other characters. So if we can't understand another person, how are we going to understand another character? So there are so many layers here to Oracy that are incredibly important to young people in general, but for the listeners of this podcast, there's so much there. So if the parents can, I want to say enforce, that's a horrible word, can drip this in, like you say, the dinner table, the walks, the drives. I love the idea of having these sort of almost conversation topic starters. I think that's wonderful. You could also get others to come up with them, couldn't you? Sorry.
Exactly. And just thinking on the sort of young actors as well, there's no reason why, some brilliant sort of young performers are so creative that those questions could be relevant to the character as well. So I was just thinking of recently doing an acting workshop with some young students who were doing Midsummer Night's Dream, and they were only kind of 8 and 9. But I gave them this activity of kind of like building this idea of who you are. One of them was fairy, and having those kind of conversations in character. We should be teaching that at a young age, or we could be with young people. So, and if you can really clearly articulate meaning as somebody else, I mean, again, that's a brilliant skill, isn't it?
Definitely. Oh, this is brilliant. So again, those young actors that are loving it now but don't decide to take it on. I did a whole episode about, not pressuring, and it's okay to change things. They've got these skills embedded in them that they can use in life, in work, in relationships. Oh, this is very exciting. There's even more layers here than I perhaps thought.
Really, everybody should be doing drama, shouldn't they? That's the thing. Everybody should have a drama education.
Absolutely. But then I think that's difficult, isn't it? Because a lot will shy away and say, it's not for me because of so many reasons. And I used to get frustrated on the flip side as a drama teacher when a parent would say, they're coming for their confidence. And I was like, that's great, but it can't be just that. It can't, for me anyway. I don't know whether that's changed now, but I thought sometimes you can't just thrust a shy child with no support, no scaffolding, just thrust them into drama. Sometimes that's not fair on them, the others.
No, absolutely.
How is there anything that we can do? Now we want more students taking drama for the myriad of reasons. What can we do? What can parents, teachers do to support them and make sure that they're not thrust in without support?
I think, really a whole rebranding. Obviously, we want people to take drama for the love of the actual subject and drama and theatre, but also really exposing the other skills that they might develop or they could develop as part of drama, and how that's going to help them in other areas as well. So it doesn't become, you're going to go and do drama, you're going to study plays and you're going to become more confident. It's actually, as part of this, you might find that speaking up in class or working with others helps you, but it's not necessarily going to always be clear in a drama classroom. It might be that you then feel more confident in maths or in science, or but again, the skill is very worthwhile. So something that I did when I was working overseas is that I encouraged people to come and have a taster of drama to see how it could help their business skills. And that was just because the nature of the school that I was working with, business was really kind of popular.
Use that as the hook.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's wonderful. I like that a lot. And I've been teaching some students locally to where I am at the moment, and they do offer a free trial for these evening classes, and it will suit some students brilliantly and others it won't, and that's okay, or it's not the right time for them and it sits in the back of their mind and they come back when it's right for them. I think, yes, if we can approach it without the pressure and with the support, I think this is brilliant. This is also off topic from my plan, but when I was listening to you on another podcast, noticed you talking about phones and technology, and I thought, gosh, this is so important and so relevant. I wonder if you touch upon your thoughts there about, I mean, do I need to elaborate, or are you happy to go off from that?
No, so I think, there's kind of positives and negatives. I think one of the things that we're seeing, and I've got teenage daughters myself, is that young people aren't interacting in the same way that they used to. So the idea of a conversation is kind of dying. So you've got students, young people who voice note, and might send each other lengthy voice notes, which is kind of like a monologue. So actually, it's sort of good practice for a self-tape, I guess. But but not for the two-way conversation. But also, if we are using phones in the correct way, they can be of great use to a young actor. For practicing that self-tape, getting used to hearing yourself. Voice noting a monologue is always a great way of learning something, I think, as well, and just listening back, getting used to that. So whilst I believe that it has had a huge impact on communication skills, I think if we can learn how to unlock the positives around it, and this is really important in schools and in families, that we keep those conversations going.
Yes. I think it's all too easy. I've got a teen and a tween, and it is all too easy to be like, right, off your, well, it's not, it's hard, but off your phones. You're definitely more grumpy when you're stuck in your phone. But if we could learn that balance, that is the golden ticket, isn't it? So using these tools well. My youngest daughter's an actor, and our phones are so important to us. Like you said, it's the voice note, the line learning, it's our camera, it's our editing, it's a lot of things. But you can then get sucked into it in other ways. So I think the top tips I'm thinking for parents then is balance where you can, isn't it? I think either extreme is not good.
And also, if you've got those good communication skills, you're also able to understand what are the positives from what you're seeing online. And, the whole other part, I believe, of Oracy is developing that well-being and mental health. So, if you're able to have those discussions, then you might find out that your young person is feeling very overwhelmed by stuff that they're seeing online as well. But if they haven't got those skills of being able to articulate, then, that's also a big tragedy. And we know that there's lots of research from the English Speaking Union, Education Endowment Foundation, that having good oracy skills really impacts well-being.
So other than those dinner table conversations and those car journey, I noticed that with us, because normally our kids are plugged into their whatever's listening to music, and for whatever reason they weren't on this particular car journey, and the conversations that came up were mind-blowing and relevant and interesting. Felt like the shortest car journey ever, and I felt really blessed that they were opening up in this way. But that happened by accident, whether one's AirPods weren't working or something, it happened by accident. What can parents do of these teens and tweens? What are little things that we can do to help our children with these oracy skills, whether they're actors or not? How can we help them?
So a good sort of exercise that I do in the classroom that I think you could equally do at home. So I alluded earlier to the fact that we just assume that people can talk in, groups with ease, but actually that often needs a bit of support and scaffolding. So at home, you could take a topic or a debate and give everybody a role, whether you're going to support that. So it's kind of like a mini debate, but you're not, otherwise you're going to end up with the same person speaking as you would in a classroom. Oh, you're going to be the opposer. I'm going to be the sort of like mediator around this. So definitely that's something that you could do at home as well. But I think the key thing really is to try and develop that communication with your young people. And, I know that from lots of parents, they find that increasingly difficult. So even if it's just snippets at the beginning and the end of the day, and low stakes, low pressure. So, sometimes it's kind of like, oh, how are you? What was school like today? And you get kind of a grunt or nothing. Yeah. And then the conversation kind of stops. So some of the things that I do with young people that, again, I think could be transferred is like, oh, tell me about your day in 60 seconds, go. And, and you can sort of refer that to any other subject as well. What was the best thing? Where would you like to travel to next? 60 seconds, go. What do you think about? And then it's kind of, it's a bit of a little bit of pressure, but also, they know it's going to end. So
no, I like that. Like you said, low stakes. I think that's really important. And if they decide that they would then want to bring in more complicated topics, fantastic. But they're getting used to talking. I like that. 60 seconds. I feel like I could squeeze that out of my children. They might even enjoy it. Yes.
And also,
I can do that in character. Sorry.
Absolutely. The other thing is to get them to bring. So, okay, give me 3 topics that you would like to discuss. So rather than you always being the driver of the conversation, can you, or even, those 3 topics that we're going to discuss over the next week, give me, your choice, can be anything.
Nice.
And then it's sort of, if you think about kind of for public speaking, that's always a good starting point. If you've ever got to do something like that, is okay, we'll start practicing with talking about something you love. And then, you can sort of transfer it to whatever project you've got to do that on.
That's perfect. I used to teach, though I still do occasionally, the Lambda public speaking.
Yeah.
And if the student enjoyed their topic or was passionate about their topic, so much easier. I'm just thinking out loud now that we used to have this jar of activities and we haven't looked at it for ages. We all wrote down things we'd like to do on a family Sunday. They're harder and harder to find now. But I'm thinking we could have an Oracy jar, perhaps not call it that. It sounds very formal. They could be topics, couldn't they? Yeah. You could pick it out and you could toss it aside if you don't like it. Or
exactly.
Go, ooh, I'm going to have this at my dinner table tonight. Definitely. Ooh, thank you, Georgie. I'm excited. I can see that working quite easily for parents. That feels tangible and simple. And yeah, because we talk about it, I get the importance of it. I think almost anyone listening will, but it's how do we put it into place? I think, without it being a huge burden of something that we must do, to try and make it fun and light. I love that. I'm 100%. I'm going to do that tonight. I'll let you know. And
also, I think again, beginning with the why. So a lot of the time we kind of, say this is important, but we don't really explain why. And I think if you look at kind of, okay, wherever you want to go in life, you're going to have to do this. And I think I was working with a graduate student recently who was, she'd applied for loads and loads of jobs and she was having to do a presentation and she'd literally never practiced that. She'd never had any practice and she was at a great uni. So the first time was when she was working with me on this PowerPoint. And so again, it's kind of, why are we doing this when you're really young? Well, actually, it's like really fun, but also, like you do maths, English, science, this should be part of a kind of healthy education.
And is it now? So obviously I'm out of mainstream education now because I'm off doing my own thing, acting and managing little children. Is it? I feel like it's in the media a little bit and it is in school more now. Is there hope? Is this better?
Absolutely. So there's been a real groundswell. We had the Oracy Commission report, We Need to Talk, that came out in 2024. And then we've had the curriculum review, which stipulates that Oracy now must be part of the curriculum, which is fabulous. So we're really hoping that's for 2027, that's integrated. But actually, at the moment, I'm part of the Implementing Oracy programme at the University of Cambridge. And through that, I've met lots of people championing Oracy in the UK schools, and really inspiring to hear some of the work that's going on. So there absolutely is a kind of movement. And also for the arts as well, there's going to be much more focus on enrichment and extracurricular. So I really hope that we see drama and the arts becoming really much bigger part of school curriculums, because
Me
they're
too.
essential.
Me too. And then I need to find someone who will put screen acting into that, because again, teaching drama all my life, love the theatre, love that as a basis. And I used to get actors in for workshops, but there's nothing in the curriculum under English or drama really, unless you get to media studies, but then it's usually approaching it not from an actor's point of view. And I feel, so I'm going off topic a little bit, we'll have to find a guest. I feel that that's neglected from schools, and the world now that you're going into to try and get representation and send self-tapes, it's so different to a theatre audition and the things you'd learn in a drama class. But yeah, that's I think if we keep on top of these oracy skills, then that's for another time to add that
Yeah, and I think
area
that's
as
a
well.
really important point, for the world of drama and auditioning, but also for interviews. Most of interviews are now online. So actually
Yes.
being able to practice these skills online as well as in person, it should also be part of a good curriculum. So
I think there's sort of a double pro and con there, that you might feel more comfortable because you're at home and the audience aren't physically there, but then you've got the technology to think about. I think perhaps the young people now are better at some of the adults at this, but yeah, it looks like it's here to stay in some capacity. There's going to be a mixture, isn't there, of in person and online. There are people in my husband's company who have never had an in person interview. It's always been online. So then they need to be taught these skills in person. I think it can be different reading somebody and interacting with somebody in person. Again, pros and cons both ways. So we need to be prepared for all of it, don't we?
yeah, there's a lot of work to do in this in this field, but a lot of exciting
Oh,
and positive work as well. And finally, it feels like that these skills are getting there, having their moment.
that's great. And thank you for the work that you're doing and that this is being pushed. I think it's wonderful. Georgie, at the end of my interviews, we like to do a little quick fire round of a few questions. Are you up for that?
Absolutely.
Amazing. So, first thing that drops into your head, I'm going to pull up the quick fires that I wanted for you. Here we go. One thing that helps someone come across clearly and confidently.
I think the one of the best things that you can do is think about your pace.
Yes.
So make sure that you are speaking clearly and slowly.
Very nice, because we can all get overexcited, myself included, and race definitely in performance and public speaking. Definitely. Okay, question 2. A common mistake people make when they're speaking.
Not giving time for the audience to think about what they're saying. So again, whenever I'm teaching this, if you think about when you're reading a book, you do sort of pause when there's a full stop. And likewise, when you're speaking, giving that time for the audience to reflect as well.
Well, that's so perfect for actors and young people in general, and older people, of course. Okay, one simple thing that young people can practice at home.
So I always encourage young people to practice, even if they're practicing to the wall, if you're working on a piece of acting, to try to different rooms and different audiences. So even if the audience isn't real, that you're imagining an
The line of
audience.
teddy bears, yes.
Exactly. So you're getting used to different acoustics. Try going outside when you're speaking. So, take your monologue on a bit of a journey, or whatever your audition is, so that when you do have to do a live audition, those different things don't sort of sway you too much.
That's perfect for those in both theatre and film as well, because you will need to project so differently for theatre than with a microphone in your face. So that's perfect. Different places. I find that a good line learning tip as well. If students learn their lines in different places, they definitely go in better.
And
And
actually, so just to add to that, so my daughter's a singer, and she last year we were looking at a lot of different music colleges, and we went to the Royal Academy, and they have a room where you can stand and say, right, I want the acoustics of the Royal Albert Hall, and I want a bored audience. And then
that's
suddenly the
amazing.
screen will come up with the audience kind of on their phones, not looking. And then you'll
Yes.
get these acoustics, and then you'll actually be able to feel what it would be like in that setting. So,
Brilliant.
yeah, hopefully maybe we'll have that in schools one day.
Wouldn't that be great? Like, let's use all of the technology to our advantage. I think that's brilliant. And all the different combinations of acoustics and
Yeah,
audience.
yeah,
Because again, if there's a few people in the audience, they're going to soak up sound less than a packed. Oh,
absolutely.
that's so exciting. Right, final quick fire. What does real confidence actually look like to you?
I think it's really knowing your worth. So it might not be something that you necessarily see, but if you feel it, if you feel assured and confident, and if you're thinking about acting really well rehearsed, that naturally gives you, I think, the ability to walk into a room and feel confident. It's when we are not sure of what we're doing or who we are that we become unstuck.
I think you've really hit onto something there. I talk a lot about people being themselves, and that's very relevant in casting today. I think if you can be yourself and be confident with your material, that's gold. I think that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. So Georgie, tell us, those who are listening and want to follow you, see more of your work, where can they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Georgie Ross, and I do lots of different things. So I do some work for the English Speaking Union, so you might see me in schools anyway. And I'm also currently supporting an organisation that's developing an Oracy Centre in India, which will be kind of India's first Oracy Centre, which is really exciting as well. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, then you'll see the journey of that as well, which
That's
hopefully will
amazing.
lead to lots more international projects.
That's brilliant, and that's where we first connected on LinkedIn. So I'll be sure to keep
Yes.
keep looking out for all of that. Sounds brilliant. And did you say you've written a book recently?
Yeah, I'm writing a book at the moment. It's not finished yet, and it's
Okay.
drama and oracy, and it's basically all about unlocking sort of oracy potential through drama activities. Which, there's as you know, we could talk for hours about this.
Well, we definitely could. So that's going to be relevant to teachers, both in school and, the drama teachers and practitioners outside of schools as well, parents of young performers. I think that sounds really exciting. Thank you
Yeah.
so
Oh,
much.
no worries. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Well, thank you for your time and your patience with me as I've thought through some extra questions, and your expertise today. I think it will really help young performers and the parents that are listening. And to our audience, thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please feel free to share it with someone who might need it. And if you're enjoying the podcast, do follow the show so that you don't miss future episodes. And please feel free to leave a comment or review, because all of that really helps. As always, you can find more support, resources, and coaching at The Drama Coach across all of my social